if the team goes away. We don't have to keep paying for it, right? It's one-time upload and it's stored. We designed the gateway node itself to be like super flexible and scalable, meaning you could deploy it on a Raspberry Pi. You could deploy it on a really beefy bare metal server. We wanted to make it so that it can scale really big, but it was ultimately up to the operator on what they wanted to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unleashing DePIN Podcast. My name is Tyler. I'm your host, and I'm really excited for our next guest, not just because he's got a guitar-filled background similar to mine, but because he's building an awesome project. We've got Phil from RIO on the podcast. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Tyler. Still recovering a little bit from East Denver, but...
You and me both, man. You and me both. Maybe we can jump in to the conversation with kind of understanding a little bit about who you are, getting a background on yourself for the audience, and we can dive into everything that you're building.
Sure, yeah. Most recently known for, founder of the RIO network. But I've been in Web3 and more specifically this Arweave ecosystem, since maybe 2018. My background was always in systems architecture, enterprise IT. And that's what brought me into crypto in general was the mining aspects, the running these nodes and synchronizing these ledgers got me hooked, specifically Ethereum. And I saw this opportunity for world computers. Wow, this is really cool compared to what I was doing in my day-to-day job. But the utility of it didn't quite click. And that's when I had discovered Arweave, which I don't know if you or the audience is familiar with Arweave, but decentralized storage network, pay once, store forever. I discovered that in 2018, and I couldn't participate in any of the token sale because I was based in the US. So I was, hey, let's figure out the infrastructure and let's try to mine it. And that's really when I went deep and I built a whole bunch of different computers to focus on Arweave's proof of access mining algorithm, where you're really storing data and proving that you have access to it. And yeah, that's what got me hooked. And I went from being a miner and to really going back to my roots as being more of a software developer. That's way back when. That's what I went to school for, computer science. And in 2020, I decided to quit my comfortable but really demanding job as being an enterprise architect. And I started this app called ArDrive, retail-focused app. It just makes it really easy to use Arweave, this permanent storage. So it's uploading, downloading, sharing any of your personal or private files. It's evolved since then. But yeah, that's what kind of got me into this whole ecosystem. And we saw some opportunities on the infrastructure side. Even though I was trying to get away from nodes, I really wanted to do something that your everyday person could understand. And we got that with ArDrive, but we saw the need for decentralizing the access. At the time, there was a single gateway, arweave.net, and every ArDrive user was uploading and downloading through that gateway. And yeah, it's great if your data is stored and replicated everywhere, but it'd be a problem if that single access point gets shut down. So that's where the RIO network was born out of. And now it's turned into this whole really a permanent cloud network of different services that provide data uploading and downloading and caching and a whole bunch of things to make the experience of using permanent storage a whole lot better. And yeah, we just launched our mainnet a few weeks ago. So it was really exciting. And it's been a long journey to where we've gotten to today.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Maybe one of the great places for us to start is to just understand or unpack a little bit like the Arweave ecosystem, this permanent storage solution. It's been around for a while, so it definitely it predates this DePIN term. But for people that are maybe familiar with other companies like Filecoin, can you maybe help unpack and help folks understand really where Arweave fits into kind of this permanent storage space?
Yeah, that's a really good point or a good question, right? You figure blockchains, they store information, right? And they replicate it around the world. It's just they're built for tiny amounts of information, right? And the incentives around it are for tiny amounts, mostly financial transactions. So Arweave is an attempt at making a blockchain suitable for storing any size of data. Now, there's other protocols out there that are used for adding or applying content addresses to data, like IPFS, for example. A content address is just describing what the data is. It doesn't have things like who might have that data, like which cryptographic address might have that data, or anything around a timestamp of when that data might have been created or existed. So you have protocols like that and things like BitTorrent as well that are used to just share data around the world. You have incentivized versions of those protocols, like you mentioned, Filecoin, I think is built off of IPFS. I think it works, again, different from Arweave. It's not one size fits all permanent data storage only. I think you can have different deals you make with providers. And then I think there's other decentralized storage networks out there as well, outside of Filecoin. Arweave is really unique in a sense that it leverages a protocolized endowment. So when you upload a file, you pay a lot. It goes into this endowment that's used to pay for the storage of that file over a really long period of time. On top of any of I think there's still a mining reward for Arweave miners and the transaction fees themselves that the miners earned. That model is just hyper focused on storing and replicating data for a really long period of time, forever, right? There's no end to what's in the protocol. So it's just, compared to those other systems, Arweave is just, it has that incentive, and similar, like I was saying about IPFS, it has the timestamp, right? It has the provenance of who uploaded that data. So you can really prove that you had access to it at that point in time, and hashes can all be verified and all that stuff. We build on top of this like kind of primitive hard drive.
Sure. You're definitely, there's always maybe the misunderstanding that not everything's going to be stored on chain. Like you've got financial transactions with Bitcoin and you've got other types on Ethereum, but Arweave is maybe the intersection of those things where you're able to leverage the timestamps and other cryptographic attributes to ensure that you can point back to those, whatever those stored data sets are with the chain, which is really interesting. And so you're building the layer above that. Maybe you can help us understand the different maybe components or things that are really part of your layer specifically that you're building.
Yeah. So I mentioned we're a permanent cloud network, right? So think of it maybe more like AWS, right? Amazon Web Services or GCP, right? It's really a collection of a bunch of things, and developers can use the tools or the services that they want. So our drive, think of it like that's the storage primitive. You can use other types of compute like AO or Ethereum or other blockchains for your smart contracting language and platforms. And maybe we can talk more specifically about that later. Figure above that layer, right? Above the storage and compute layer, you have these specialized cloud services like for uploading base layer transactions or bundled data items and broadcasting those chunks to the Arweave network, or accessing any of that data, right? Like Arweave, it doesn't store the contiguous version of a file, right? It breaks things up into chunks. But when you upload a PDF or a video or whatever, you want to see like that version of the file, not little chunks. So the gateways are responsible for, putting them all together, caching them in a really fast cache so you can access them quickly. It'll do media streaming of videos or music. It will host and serve entire web apps and sites, right? So you can upload your React app or your static site or your WordPress clone, and the gateway will resolve all those and render those pages. And the other kind of more innovative thing that's part of the network that we've added on since the whole idea came to be was this concept of the Arweave Name System, which is like DNS in a sense that you buy a domain name and you can use it for your identity. You can transfer tokens to it similar to ENS. What you actually get is a real domain name that's accessible on any of the gateways that are joined on the network. So you can buy the name Unleashing DePIN and then use it on unleashingdepin.gateway.io or .permagate or .arweave.net. And I think there's 300 or so gateways. So it's got a name system. Again, the network does a lot of things. So name system is important. It's doing indexing of all that data and provides a GraphQL to query against it. There's some management tools that are included. So it's really like a whole suite of services and things for developers and operators to manage.
You're really unlocking what is the future of decentralized web in a lot of respects, whether it's through the cloud services or some of these other mechanisms. If you've ever deployed a Vercel site, for example, you're probably familiar with some of those toolings or infrastructures, and that's a key part of what you're solving, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, coming back to our drive, we keep using that as kind of the base app to showcase all this stuff. So you mentioned Vercel, right? We host our drive on the RIO network, right? So you can get any version of the R Drive app going back in time from whatever is the first version we uploaded. It's not going to go away if the team goes away. We don't have to keep paying for it, right? It's one-time upload and it's stored. So it's like really pennies to upload an entire version of the app. And it uses these different cloud services like the index to find your data and the cache to make sure it's fast and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's huge. Can you talk about, you mentioned there was like 200 of these different like services, if you will. What does it look like for people who are participating at the RO network or the RO.io portion of the network to either participate with those different services? What does that really look like tangibly for people in the network on a node operator side?
Yeah, there's around 300 or so different nodes on the network. We designed the gateway node itself to be like super flexible and scalable, meaning you could deploy it on a Raspberry Pi. You could deploy it on a really beefy bare metal server. You can deploy in AWS. It's just some Docker containers. And the minimum footprint, I think the smallest we recommend, 2 CPU, I think 8 gig of RAM, right? That's what I have on the Raspberry Pi here. Now, you keep in mind that all depends on what you want to do with it. So that's like the bare minimum. If you're going to be indexing all, I don't know how many billion transactions there are, 14 billion, 15 billion maybe. If you're going to index them all, obviously you're going to need bigger storage, more network throughput, right? You don't need the 50 megabits minimum network that we recommend. If you are going to be streaming your Netflix clone app from your gateway, consuming massive amounts of bandwidth, right? You'll have to account for that. We wanted to make it so that it can scale really big, but it was ultimately up to the operator on what they wanted to do with it. All of these services come available in some kind of default configuration. For example, you're not forced to index all layer 2, all 15 billion transactions, but you are forced to do some other things like serve data, serve RNS names, render data, observe the network, and participate in the incentive protocols that exist. Yeah, it's finding that balance of making it easy to deploy and making it so you don't need to spend $1 bajillion on some server, right? To ultimately sit there and not really do useful work.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. And what does the network look like today in terms of people that are running these nodes, or whether they're the gateway layer? Is it one node per gateway? Is that correct?
Exactly. Figure gateway equals node.
Okay.
Now, a node, is doing those different things, but I'm equating the words the same. You can go to gateways.ar.io. You can see the list of gateways. You have to stake the RIO token to join the network. And then there's a delegated staking component as well. So you don't have to be an operator to like take part in the network rewards. But yeah, the operators range, right? You can scroll at the bottom of the list, see the lowest stake gateways. Maybe these are the ones that have just recently joined. We did a gateway operator incentive program where we selected, I think it was 29 or so different teams that were vetted that could provide a higher quality of service. And yeah, we're more established projects. And this is on top of, we were in testnet for, I think, 2+ years. So we like had a real committed group of existing gateway operators who've committed a lot to the network. That's a mix of gateway operators that are in there now. And it's cool to see, like we run some other stats, like there's dozens of different top level domains. They're mostly spread around the world. I think maybe some like Africa can always use more gateways in Africa, but I think and maybe Australia. I don't know if we have a gateway in Australia yet, but we have some nice coverage globally. We're always looking to improve that. We don't want to just have one particular region or country overloaded with all the gateways, right? That kind of poses a bit of a risk. But
it's huge. I love that. And I definitely want to ask about your customer traction and where you're seeing a lot of kind of developer, just builder interest on the network. But I think one thing I wanted to unpack a little bit more was your Arweave Name System is really, I think, an interesting unlock for allowing kind of this full stack development in more of a distributed network type solution. And maybe can you share, is it required? What is that really translated to in terms of developers building on the network, and what's possible by having this that maybe wasn't there before your name service?
So when we first came up with the RIO network, we were looking at the existing gateway functionality, reading data, writing it, indexing. And it wasn't until maybe a few months after we really had the idea when we were just sharing links. We were going arweave.net/along transaction ID. And I think I was sharing a link on LinkedIn to a more professional audience, whatever. And I'm like, no one's going to click on this.
Yeah.
It looks like spam. And actually, if you go to an Arweave transaction on the gateway, it'll start with arweave.net transaction ID, but it'll flip and add like a subdomain in front of it. So it looks even worse in the end. To your comment on, is a name required? No, the gateways will always render data using transaction IDs. Same thing, Arweave nodes. If it's a layer 1 data item transaction, you can go to an Arweave node, stroke transaction ID. So definitely not required to use the name system. Just DNS, are you required to buy a domain?
Technically, no.
You can have an IP address.
So you're really solving the problem of, instead of a cumbersome raw IP address, you've got a human-friendly name. Instead of a transaction ID, you've got a human-friendly name in front of that, right?
And it also doubles as your identity as well. So the wallet that owns the name, you can send tokens to it, right? Like you get that same benefit of it's your domain. It's how you can host any piece of content on Arweave and your identity, right? And you can create, they're called undernames, which are like subdomains underneath it. You can, map your website, your document, your movie, whatever you want, right? You can assign it as your primary name. So then it shows up in different app experiences. Like when you log into our drive in the top, it'll show, in my case, Volanarios, right? Instead of my wallet address. So it fits in all these little pieces that I guess in Web 2, you just expect. You don't access things by a DNS name. You don't you don't access things by an IP address. You don't send emails to an IP address. That's when it all clicked, this name system. And that's when you're like, okay, how do you buy the names? We found a good, strong utility for the token. So to purchase a name, you have to use the RAO token. You can lease it. You can permanently buy a name. And then, managing it is very cost effective. And this plays now into the gateways, right? Because the gateways are resolving these names. They're serving that data. So all name purchases go to the RAO network protocol balance. And that actually pays out the gateway operators for, performing the service of resolving these names and rendering whatever data.
Very cool.
They're mapped.
That's very cool. So I could theoretically have, for every podcast episode, I could have my own domain potentially, or maybe a subdomain that would be for the episode specific that gets stored on the network. That's super cool.
You got it.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's all about making it easy and familiar for someone who's not used to hashes or whatever,
Yeah, most people aren't, I think. So there's definitely a strong argument there. Speaking of use cases, what are the types of customer demographics or sort of the things that people are building on the network? Are there some really great examples you're able to share with us?
There's definitely a few. You could check out our website, ar.io. I think we have a nice use cases page that we spent a little bit of time on to really showcase what's out there. Looking at just permanent storage in general, right? You can use it for a lot of different things. So if anything that's been a difficult thing for us, because you can use, anything could be stored, right? What we see emerging is, sure, there's file storage, apps like ArDrive, just storing personal data. ArDrive specifically offers private data as well. There's some encryption there. Just file storage has always been one of the first use cases for Arweave. That has lent itself to NFTs. So again, before the RAO network was really a thing, people were storing NFT data on Arweave, right? Token on Ethereum, frog picture on Arweave, and then you map those two. Interesting enough, a lot of those mappings use this thing called the AR:/ protocol, which is another thing that the RAO network is trying to provide. So then you don't even need to know which domain name you go to. It's just the Arweave hash. But NFTs has always been a big use case, and that's come and gone with the market, let's say. It's been Arweave has been a kind of a bedrock for other blockchain data as well. So there's teams like Kive that are out there actually archiving platforms, I think like Celestia and other maybe data availability chains and other blockchains. They're archiving that data to Arweave, right? They're uploading it through the RAO network and they're accessing it through the RAO network. So that's been another kind of big use case of using this data storage network as a base layer for other blockchains. One of the biggest use cases with ArNS specifically is simply hosting like your Linktree page or your personal homepage. We've seen a lot of that, and there's a few apps out there now. I think it's metalinks.ar.io, which just make that really easy. So that's something like builders are starting to create these tools to make it really easy to now deploy your app or a little page and map it to your name and manage it and do all those things. So it's cool to see that. And I think maybe more recently, the use case that we're trying to talk the most about is just the applications for AI in terms of just storing real or synthetic data and then getting that data provenance and verifiability on top of that, to even storing the AI models themselves or the front ends that leverage these things. Yeah, we've been seeing a big uptick in that usage as well. That might blend a little bit into the AO computer and some of the usage we're seeing there that's actually using these models and this data that's been uploaded. But yeah, it's very exciting to see how we can impact this whole new field, right? I'm passionate about AI, but this is something that we see, yeah, we're really contributing to ensure it's done in a more decentralized and verifiable, yeah, cryptographically secure way.
That's really big. You mentioned the AO computer. I'm curious, like, how you're envisioning your specific solution being maybe a catalyst for adoption or these other applications there. Maybe the level set, if you can share a little bit of information about what that is for folks that aren't familiar, but also talk about your role in making that more viable or just more compelling solution for people that are in the market, if you will.
Yeah. So I'm still working on my own pitch for AO that it's easy enough to understand. Let's say so AO, to take a step back, is a new compute platform, supercompute platform that Forward Research, the team who developed Arweave, who innovated there, has created. They launched the AO testnet, I think, in March of last year. It just launched its own mainnet this year. It was, something that both is very synergistic with the RIO network. In a sense, we provide services to the computer parts of AO and something that we leverage, right? So the RIO token is built on AO. The logic for ArNS, all of our smart contract is built on AO. And think of it like a smart contract platform that is not dependent on a single state. So Ethereum or Solana as a single state machine, even though Solana, there's really high throughput and it's really fast, single state machine, it still is a single one. I think the advantages of AO, it allows basically each process to be its own single state. It can be like,
do you know, can you explain how that is? I know this is a little bit outside of your purview per se, but how is that? Is it like through a sharding mechanism? So like, how do you achieve that multi-threaded state, if you will?
Yeah, so it's sharded from a few different ways: the compute, the messaging, the sequencing. This is where some of the new AO mainnet innovations have changed some of the terms. But like each process can basically have its own version of AO, whether it's just from the read side on compute or submitting messages or scheduling those and sequencing them. Everything is ultimately settled on Arweave. So anyone can come along and just set up what's called a compute unit and replay and read all those messages. So it's very scalable from the read side, provided there's enough compute units out there. So I think some of the pieces of AO are still being built. So definitely encourage audience to check out their Twitter and some of the announcements there.
Yeah. You're definitely an integral component of that. On the smart contracting side of it, how much of that is driven by what your team's built versus like the AO team? Can you help me understand that a little bit?
Yeah, we work really closely with the AO team in a few different capacities. Let's say our smart contract is running on AO. So what does that mean? If you are reading ArNS, if you are reading the gateway address registry or getting a balance, you're going to an AO compute unit to fetch that information. Now, the AO compute unit has to read data from Arweave to fetch all of the checkpoints and state changes. To do that reading, sure, it can go directly to Arweave and fetch the chunks and do all that stuff, right? You can always go directly to the hard drive, but it uses the RIO network and its GraphQL to find all of the transactions, as well as fetching checkpoint data, as well as even writing the checkpoints themselves, all go through the bundling services on RIO. So it's like this synergistic relationship between the two. And it's even more synergistic from the perspective of even gateways. So if you deploy a gateway, it ships with a compute unit. It's currently optional. We might make it default. Ultimately, if you want the best quality of service, you could, again, depend on other people's compute units or run the service yourself and have that latest state of the name registry, the address, the gateway registry, and so on. So yeah, even from an infrastructure perspective, it makes sense to co-locate either these gateways and all their services, as well as AO, the compute layer, and even to the degree of Arweave nodes, right?
Yeah.
Like we really see a world where the biggest providers, miners, whatever you want to call them, have this whole stack, all the things, and they're able to benefit from the economies of scale. And because they have all the data and all the different layers, yeah, they'll earn the most. They'll be able to charge additional fees on top of that if they want for specialized services. That's how we see it going, because they're so synergistic.
Yeah. And it's probably, if you're not a developer who have an interface with some of these things, like whether it's Open Graph or other interconnected technologies that you're leveraging within the overall network or that you're able to interface with, it's hard to really appreciate like how impactful that single source of access truth might be for people. Because otherwise you're in like the Web 2 space, most of that gets abstracted through different service providers. And the fact that you can have a parity feature set, if you will, is really massive. I'm just curious on the smart contracting language, what is that actually written in for people that are, writing their own smart contracts? Is it Solidity based? Is it Rust? Is that something you can share?
Yeah, it's come a long way with smart contracting stuff. It all used to be in TypeScript.
Okay.
We converted it to Lua. That was, let's say, the starting native language on AO. Because AO stands for actor-oriented, which is this different model of computing. It may be more similar to something that like a functional programmer can maybe jive with. But yeah, Lua was the starting language, but it runs anything that can compile down to WASM. Yeah, that could be Rust. It could be, I think, like C. I think there might be some C++ written modules out there. This is something where AO and both RAO are meant to be super flexible, not specific to some coding language. Even like the wallets that you can use. Sure, it's Arweave native, so you can use an Arweave wallet, but Ethereum signing, Solana, there's other signing types that are supported. We really try to be interoperable to that degree.
That's huge. What else is next for the team in terms of either developer roadmap or things that are coming down the pike?
Yeah, before I named a whole bunch of services, right? The gateway does this and this. We really want to make sure each one is appropriately incentivized, not from the perspective of you can charge fees, but there's a protocol that is incentivizing the gateway operator to do that specific thing. So I think there's the starting mainnet V1, I don't think we really have a name for it. The first version of the mainnet that we released, the incentives are really focused around ArNS, right? Purchasing names, paying gateways to serve them. I think, yeah, what's next is looking at some of those other things, maybe like indexing and seeing how we could put more incentives on top of that. We have some other thoughts around providing some tooling to make it easier to route to gateways as well as verify any of the data client side. So like from routing, I mentioned like AR:/. We already have some loose implementations of this. We have a Chrome extension called Wayfinder, which you can type in AR:/, and any RNS name or a transaction ID, and it'll route you to a highly performant two-state gateway. We want to make that into more of a protocol that you can maybe plug into your app or site like really easily, and then add some verification on top of that. So that's not to say the RIO nodes aren't actually verifying the data and providing that information to users, but we do feel like for the highest security scenarios, having client-side data verification will be important. So we're going to maybe work on tooling there as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're just like at this point where we're just taking feedback from what teams are trying to do with the gateways, big or small. What we have our list, our internal roadmaps, but we really want to build things that people want to use. So we're certainly taking ideas and feedback of that kind of thing too.
Your comment about client-side verification has been a bit of a hot topic lately, where we've seen when there is not client-side verification, the potential problems that can be generated from that, notably the big exchange hack that happened as of late. And
gone through that so many times. And like, we think we have a really compelling solution that, sure, I don't think you can truly prevent a hack. If a team's really committed, you can't prevent something. But I do think with decentralized access points and ArNS and cryptographic signatures and all these protections and immutability guarantees, can really help those scenarios.
I love that. There's one thing that your team or you hope that your team finishes or achieves by the next time we were to have a conversation about what you're building, for example, what would you say that is? Is it related to increased node services or the interoperability? What's your high level target that you're looking to finish?
Yeah, maybe break it down into a few things. So on one hand, there's a lot of community growth and adoption that we still want. We have, thoughts and ideas on how to engage the community with more airdrops and fun things like that. That's maybe one side. We've released our tokenomics, and we have more to go in that area when it comes to community distribution. When it comes to what we've released so far, we're really trying to push ArNS adoption. Again, whether that's for your identity, homepage, building things on top of it. There's going to be a lot of effort around that. We hope to also see more node distribution. There's around 305 or so gateways that have joined. So now that mainnet has launched and the token is on DEXs right now, we're seeing new gateways actually joining, which has been great because for a long time we were on a permission testnet basically. And anytime you wanted to join, you had to ask the team. So it's nice to see that natural rhythm of nodes joining and leaving starting. There's still some things on AO that we're trying to wrap our hands around. There's a whole big upgrade called Hyperbeam, which, we're going through this R&D approach now and seeing how it can benefit IO. Maybe a little sneak peek at one of the things that we're just able to do, but one of the capabilities that Hyperbeam, which is a new deployment of AO, allows is to have full signed messages for any response provided by a gateway. So you can, for example, go to volanarios.com, which is my gateway, and any response you get for an RNS name, Arweave transaction ID, anything is now fully signed by my gateway. So now you have pretty irrefutable proof that I served you this thing. So what that means in the long term, ultimately, is maybe better penalties or ways to handle when gateways. So something else that we don't want you to have to run special software to verify all the data.
Yeah.
We want the network to be like self-healing and to detect that stuff and do all those things for the user. So we'll see what kind of AO and Hyperbeam might help in that scenario on top of maybe a few other things.
Sure. One question I have, this is a little bit more in the technical weeds, but are there different incentives around the hardware for nodes that are providing those things? Like, for example, like a bare metal signer versus like a Raspberry Pi that maybe doesn't have as many cryptographic assurances around the signing capabilities. Is that built into the different node types of the network that you're able to talk about at all?
Yeah. So right now, the nodes don't have any requirement like that. Okay. Figure what balances it out is if you do join a low powered node and then it starts getting accessed and used and then it goes offline, you'll be marked as down by the rest of the gateway network and you won't receive any rewards. We do have plans to supplement with more work, like maybe around the indexing side and just some other areas, right? We always knew the gateway does such a few things. So we always knew we weren't able to hit every incentive box at the start. So certainly a little bit of work to go, but there's no proportional reward for deploying on a really beefy box versus a small one.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I think it's super, super fascinating what you're building because what we all love and buy into in terms of the benefits of this Web3 decentralized compute infrastructure, we often take for granted how many of those kind of key infrastructure layer stacks we have with the current web, whether they're standards, whether they're protocols, but they're all more or less required to be able to do what we do today. And so you guys are super integral in being able to push that, again, feature parity into the new paradigm where we just don't have that today. So I think that's amazing. Was there anything else we didn't get a chance to cover that you wanted to share for listeners that might be relevant or just important for them to understand going forward?
Yeah, just give us a follow, try out ArDrive for easy uploads, try out MetaPath if you want a quick homepage. I think you can actually get an RNS name directly in that app. Join our Discord, follow us on Twitter, all those fun things. Stay tuned. I mentioned before we're currently on the ecosystem DEXs. There's still work to be done in that area when it comes to better, getting the token out there more accessible. So stay tuned from that perspective. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been fun chatting with you about this stuff.
Likewise. No, it totally makes sense. I think you're in the category of you're solving a real problem that there's probably less understanding around if you haven't been like either interfacing as a developer or frankly just taking for granted the things that we have in the kind of the current Web 2 world. And you are absolutely solving a huge problem and doing it in a way that's really equitable and raises the value for all network participants, which I think is huge. So I really appreciate you helping break that down and giving me a firsthand understanding. I think that translates for listeners. Cool, Phil. Hey, I think we'll wrap it up here. This is a really dynamic conversation. We'll definitely link all of those sites below, whether it's Twitter, go follow them, or X, I guess now, Discord, get involved, the website. Also, if you want to deploy a site, we'll have links to the tools for going and being able to do, grabbing your name within the network. That's going to be awesome. So Phil, thank you so much again for joining us. Again, we'll wrap it up here and we will see everyone on the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyler. It's great chatting with you.
Likewise.